There are certain moments in sports where the game itself is only part of the conversation. Sometimes one clip, one reaction, one sideline exchange, or one decision from an organization says more than the final score ever could. And right now, the Indiana Fever are sitting right in the middle of one of those moments. This is not just about Caitlin Clark taking another big step in her young WNBA career. It is not just about the Indiana Fever trying to figure out their identity. It is not just about Stephanie White's coaching decisions or the pressure that comes with managing the most watched player in women's basketball. This is about something bigger. It is about how a franchise handles a generational athlete when the whole city, the whole league, and the whole sports world are watching. And the timing of everything around Caitlin Clark has made this conversation impossible to ignore. On Tuesday morning, Clark received one of the biggest honors an athlete in Indianapolis can receive. She was named Grand Marshal of the Indianapolis 500, a role that places her alongside some of the most respected and recognizable sports figures connected to the city and the state. This is not a small ceremonial appearance. This is the Indy 500, one of the most historic sporting events in America, and the Grand Marshal gets to deliver one of the most famous commands in motorsports. That morning, Indianapolis was telling the world exactly how it sees Caitlin Clark, not just as a basketball player, not just as a rookie sensation or a young star. The city was treating her like one of its signature sports figures, someone whose presence now belongs in the same conversation as names like Reggie Miller, Larry Bird, Peyton Manning, and Tamika Catchings. That matters. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway did not need to over-explain the decision. It understood the obvious. Caitlin Clark has become one of the faces of sports in Indiana. She brings attention everywhere she goes. She attracts fans who normally may not follow the WNBA. She fills buildings, drives conversation, and represents a new era of women's basketball with a level of visibility the Fever have never had before. So on Tuesday morning, the city elevated her. But by Tuesday night, during a Fever game at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, a very different image started spreading. The clip that fans could not stop talking about showed Stephanie White making contact with Caitlin Clark near the sideline as Clark was heading toward the free throw line. Clark appeared to pull her arm back, and that reaction immediately lit up social media. The moment was short, but the reaction was massive because fans were not looking at it as an isolated second of game footage. They were looking at it through the lens of everything already surrounding the Fever. That is why the clip became so uncomfortable. In a normal situation, maybe people would move on quickly. Coaches talk to players. Coaches reach out during games. Sideline moments happen fast. There are emotions, communication, frustration, and intensity. But this was Caitlin Clark on national television during a season where every interaction around her is being studied. This was Stephanie White, a coach already under pressure from fans over rotations, offensive structure, and the team's inconsistent results. And this was a franchise that many fans believe has not always handled Clark with a level of clarity and protection her status demands. So people paused the clip. They replayed it. They slowed it down. They looked at Clark's reaction. They looked at White's face. They looked at who was sitting behind the bench. And then the conversation moved from one sideline moment into a much bigger debate about power, respect, and control inside the Indiana Fever organization. That is where Kelly Krauskopf and Amber Cox enter the picture. Fans noticed that Fever leadership was seated close enough to see what was happening. Krauskopf, the president of business and basketball operations, and Cox, the general manager, are not random observers. They are part of the decision-making structure of the franchise. They are tied to the roster, the direction of the organization, and the coaching setup around Clark. So when fans saw them in the building, the question became simple. What exactly is the leadership seeing, and what are they willing to do about it? Because Caitlin Clark is not just another player on the roster. She is the center of the Fever's entire modern business reality. She is the player who changed the attention around the franchise. She is the reason Indiana road games feel like events. She is the reason national broadcasts follow the Fever with a level of intensity the franchise has never experienced. She is the reason many casual fans now know the Fever schedule before they know any other WNBA schedule. That kind of player changes the expectations around an organization. And that is why fans are judging the Fever differently now. They are not only asking whether Indiana wins or loses. They are asking whether the franchise understands what it has. They are asking whether the front office is building properly around Clark. They are asking whether the coaching staff is using her correctly. The contrast with the Indianapolis 500 honor made all of this feel even sharper. The city seemed to understand Clark's value immediately. The Indy 500 put her on one of the biggest stages in American sports. It treated her as a major figure, not a side attraction. It recognized that her presence would bring attention, excitement, and cultural relevance. In other words, Indianapolis as a sports city embraced her star power. Then, hours later, Fever fans watched a sideline exchange that made some of them feel like the team itself still has not fully figured out how to handle the same star. That is the tension. The Fever are in a strange position. On one hand, they have a generational guard who is already moving the league's business in real time. On the other hand, they are still operating like a team, trying to find structure, rhythm, and internal stability. Those two realities do not always match. Clark's fame is moving faster than the franchise's development. Her impact is growing faster than the team's win total. Her importance to the league is clearer than Indiana's identity on the floor. That creates pressure on everyone. Stephanie White is coaching under a microscope. Every timeout, every rotation, every late-game possession, every benching, every off-ball action, and every sideline exchange becomes a talking point. That is not easy, but that is also the job when you coach Caitlin Clark. The spotlight is part of the package. White has history with the Fever. She is not an outsider with no connection to Indiana basketball. She was part of the franchise's early story as a player, and later she coached the team during a different era, including during Tamika Catchings' final stretch. That history matters because Fever fans remember how this franchise once protected and honored its legends. Tamika Catchings is the standard in Indiana Fever history. She gave the franchise its identity before Clark arrived. During the later part of her career, when health and workload became major factors, the organization understood the need to manage her carefully. The Fever made public-facing decisions around protecting her minutes and preserving her body. They treated her like a franchise icon whose long-term well-being mattered. That is why some fans are making comparisons now. They are asking why the Fever once seemed so clear about protecting Catchings, but now sometimes appear less certain about how to protect Clark. The situations are different, of course. Catchings was at the end of a legendary career. Clark is at the beginning of hers. But the principle is still the same. When you have a player who defines your franchise, the entire organization has to be aligned around how that player is handled. That includes coaching. That includes medical staff. That includes front office. That includes communication. That includes public optics. Clark has already dealt with physical play, heavy defensive attention, constant scrutiny, and the pressure of carrying expectations that go far beyond normal basketball. Any moment that makes fans feel the organization is not fully protecting her is going to be amplified. And that is exactly what happened with the sideline clip. Some fans saw it as a coach trying to communicate in a heated moment. Others saw it as an uncomfortable sign of tension. Some argued the reaction was overblown. Others argued it revealed something deeper about the relationship between Clark and the coaching staff. The truth may be less dramatic than the loudest reactions online, but the fact that people responded so strongly tells you something important. Trust is fragile right now. Fever fans want to believe the organization is doing everything possible to maximize Clark's career. They want to believe the coaching staff knows how to build an offense around her. They want to believe the front office understands the urgency of this window. They want to believe the franchise is not just enjoying the attention Clark brings, but actually building the right environment around her. When they see anything that suggests confusion, tension, or lack of control, the reaction is going to be immediate. That is where the long history of the Fever becomes part of the conversation. Kelly Krauskopf has been connected to this franchise from its earliest days. The decisions made in the late 1990s helped shape the Fever's identity before the team ever played a regular season game. Stephanie White's path to Indiana, Sandy Brondello's connection to those early roster moves, and the evolution of the franchise are all part of the larger basketball story in Indianapolis. Now, decades later, the same franchise is facing another defining moment. The Fever are no longer just a team trying to be relevant. Caitlin Clark has made them relevant every single night. That changes the stakes. The people running the franchise are not managing a normal rebuild. They are managing a superstar-era transition under national pressure. And if they mishandle it, fans will not be quiet. That is why the Toronto conversation keeps appearing online. Whenever Clark looks frustrated, whenever Indiana loses a close game, whenever fans question the Fever's direction, trade speculation and relocation-style fantasies start showing up in comment sections. People bring up other franchises, other coaches, and other markets that they believe would build better around Clark. Some fans mention Toronto because the new expansion team represents a fresh start, a blank slate, and a different basketball future. Now, there is no reason to treat every fan comment as a serious transaction rumor. Social media overreacts after every emotional moment. But the fact that fans are even imagining Clark somewhere else tells you how anxious some of them are about Indiana's ability to get this right. That should concern the Fever, because the most important task for Indiana is not just keeping Clark under contract. It is making her believe this is the right place to build a legacy. That means building a winning roster. It means putting her in an offensive system that makes sense. It means protecting her health. It means giving her teammates who fit. It means making sure the locker room and coaching environment are stable. It means making the franchise feel worthy of the spotlight she has brought. The Fever have made some major investments. The $78 million Sports Performance Center is proof that the organization understands the need for modern infrastructure. A 3-floor, 108,000 square foot facility is not a small commitment. That kind of investment sends a message that Indiana wants to create a professional environment worthy of elite women's basketball players. But buildings alone do not build trust. You can spend millions on facilities and still lose the room if the basketball decisions do not match the ambition. You can break ground on a state-of-the-art complex and still face criticism if the star player looks unsupported during games. You can talk about setting a new standard for female athletes, but the standard has to show up in the day-to-day handling of the franchise's most important player. That is the gap fans are pointing to. On Sunday, at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Clark was expected to stand in front of hundreds of thousands of people and deliver one of the most iconic commands in sports. That is the kind of stage usually reserved for legends, presidents, celebrities, and the most beloved sports figures connected to the city. That is not just marketing. That is civic recognition. The city has already made its decision about Caitlin Clark. It sees her as a defining figure. Now the Fever have to decide if they're going to match that level of respect internally. That does not mean treating Clark like she is above coaching. No player is above coaching. No player is bigger than accountability. Clark still has to improve her shooting efficiency, decision-making, defense, and composure in certain moments. Great players are coached hard. Great players are challenged. Great players are corrected. But coaching a generational star requires emotional intelligence. It requires understanding optics. It requires knowing when to push, when to protect, when to communicate privately, and when a moment on camera can become bigger than intended. That is the part Indiana has to manage better. Because this season is no longer happening in a normal media environment. Caitlin Clark's every move is being watched. Stephanie White's every decision is being judged. The front office's every action is being interpreted through the lens of whether Indiana is doing enough for its star. And every time the Fever look unstable, the outside noise grows louder. The organization cannot control every clip, every reaction, or every opinion. But it can control the environment it creates around Clark. It can control whether the offense looks organized. It can control how minutes are. And right now, those questions are not going away. The sideline moment may fade, but the bigger issue will remain. Does Indiana fully understand what Caitlin Clark represents. Does the franchise have the right structure around her? Is Stephanie White the right coach to maximize this era? Are Kelly Krauskopf and Amber Cox prepared to make difficult decisions if the season starts slipping? Is Herb Simon's organization ready to act like it is responsible for the most marketable athlete in women's basketball? Those are not small questions. The Fever are standing at a crossroads. They have a player the city celebrates, a fan base that is more engaged than ever, a league-wide spotlight that most franchises would dream of, and a chance to build something historic. But they also have pressure, scrutiny, and a growing sense among fans that the margin for error is getting smaller. Caitlin Clark's Grand Marshal honor showed what the outside world sees. It sees a star. It sees a cultural figure. It sees someone worthy of one of the biggest stages in sports. The sideline controversy showed what Fever fans fear. They fear the organization may not be moving with the same clarity and respect the moment demands. That is why this week felt so important. Indianapolis gave Caitlin Clark the microphone. The Fever have to prove they can give her the right team, the right system, and the right leadership. Because if they cannot, the conversation will only get louder. And in a league where star power is changing everything, the team that has Caitlin Clark cannot afford to be the last one to understand what that truly means.